thank you for once again joining us at Arc Rex Temple of Ages, Part 10. I like doing that so much. Excuse it, please. So I want to say once again thank you for joining us on this show where I'm not sure really how to sum up to all the topics we're going to talk about here. We'll call it the human condition. That's what I always kind of boil it down to, and does it encompass a lot. Yet, the good news is that it all works out in the end. Yeah. It's kind of hard to see it in time and space before it happens, and if you knew all the details, there wouldn't be any entertainment value. So, I just wanted to say, once again, thank you all for being here. I love the comments and any feedback as well. And I'd also love if people could share their synchronicities as well. And I'll do it more moving forward. If you have any things you want to put in the show that have been related to these topics and how you've been seeing it in your life, if you put it in the comments below, I might include it as well. So you never know. And also putting a picture to it as well, because I can do that. So the first thing I wanted to do is talk about the elephant in the room, and I'm once again not going to put the picture up there or say the name, yet I wanted to go over the phenomenon that's been going around our reality, because whether or not it's I go to my phone on YouTube, or I go to a random website, or go to a TV that's playing the news, the name just keeps reverberating over and over and over, no matter who I go and look at. And I get even I'm talking about it right now, yet I'm going to try to get as disengaged as possible, since I feel like we can talk about to some degree what's happening outside the window, especially when it's so forced and artificial and from every single angle and environment, and talking about why that's happening and what's around that, and where we can go from that, and how it ties into everything else. And it's kind of funny that I wanted to make a point that in Harry Potter, everyone wanted to not say Voldemort's name, yet it's kind of the opposite here, that I don't want to say his name because that's what everyone wants. Yet, if it was in the Harry Potter universe, imagine if Voldemort went on TV and he's trying to get everyone to say, like, oh, he's a great guy. I really like and respect him. He's a voice of truth. He wasn't doing that. It was the exact opposite. So we have a lot of these flip-flops, because I have no idea who that was, yet people keep talking about him. And it's very interesting, because the person that surprised me most that followed along with the download and within an hour was posting up and saying what everyone else was saying, a day later made a normal video. Then I was thinking to myself, like, oh, hey, this is normal again. All right. And like right when I thought that, it tangent and swerved right into a discussion about that. And I find his weirdest of all, because he made a point to really not talk about it, and say he doesn't want to talk about it, makes him uncomfortable. And then the next day, he makes a random live stream, and he has no slides. He just puts the person's face up there in the name, and basically hardly talks about it, and just talks about random topic. I think whenever I see content, I just move on. But things like that are kind of on the periphery, like I'll kind of poke through it, and he just kind of goes over what he always talks about. Yet he kind of had the look of this meme right here. He was kind of like nervous, and I just see that as so weird, that he himself is saying he's acting weird, and he normally never does this, yet he keeps doing it and going along with it. And, you know, I've watched this person for years, and it's just so interesting to see this behavior around this phenomena and where it's going. And I love this meme. It's from the Dexter Show. It's called the James Dokes meme. And it's this cop right here, because Dexter is this serial killer, but no one knows that's who he actually is. And this guy thinks he knows, but he can't prove it. He can't put his finger on it, yet he has all these red flags over and over and over. And it became this like reverberating meme in our reality. And I just thought that was kind of funny, because it popped up not only once, but twice, because they remade the series recently. And the meme went viral because it's just so applicable in our reality right now. And with this like fourth wall breaking nature of these memes, this person, and like what they're trying to pre-program us with, and the whole story we're in. And I even found a meme of it related to the Helldivers universe, which I've been talking about so much and relates so much to my story and how it's reverberated in memes. And I've always wanted to talk about Helldivers, that there's a meme from the game that everything is canon. So if you're playing the game and you do something really goofy, the idea is, and people say this in the comments of the videos of people watching it, that that's canon. Like, and we've been talking about that, especially like Spider-Man in the last episode, that the canon is what it's supposed to be. Like the Harry Potter books. Like if I wrote my own fan fiction of Harry Potter, that's not canon anymore. That's just my own fan fiction. So it's the reality everyone agrees upon, and everyone agrees upon that this reality is that everything is agreed upon and taken seriously. Which, try to wrap your mind around that. And I kind of wanted to take that to the never-ending story, that this is the person bringing everything to life, just this kid in this attic somewhere that's on the edge of society, yet he's bringing this entire world to life, and with this Kundalini symbolism and the divine care, and even this like plasma mountain in the background. And we'll really come back to that by the end as well. So remember the blue plasma and the mountain it comes out of. And this meme about holding back toxic thoughts, because I promised I'd work on it. And I really am. And it's just amazing right now that I feel like if you're a normal human being, and we all have different coping mechanisms, but that if you don't really have a bubble right now, the world's going so weird that it's starting to overwhelm my daily ability. The way it's built right now, I'm not saying I can't make it better, of my ways to cope with stress. Because it's just, because I can laugh at some of it, but it just amazes me how it seems to find a way around what I'm okay with, and then whatever's bugging me just kind of like keeps reverberating. And I'm really trying to keep the positivity going so I can manifest the future I want and not all this toxicity. But it's just amazing how this reality works. And I found this other meme that waking up every morning in 2025 is like, let's see, where are we? Ah, yes, the pit of despair. It's not that bad, but it's, and I'm not saying our own individual lives, but if we're looking at the whole of our reality and you put together a news list of like what's going on in every country, it seems to be going more towards chaos. And that's kind of what I'm going with this meme. And how we're going to try to find balance with that, because in that chaos we can find that love, that order, and that's how every story goes. The never-ending story, everything had to be torn away into the nothing or the abyss before it was reset back into the golden age. So while we have this awesomeness, we also have the part that is freaking out and taking, because this is the two sides of serious, that you're not serious at all and you're taking it way too seriously. And I have these parts of me as well, and I just kind of wanted to include this meme about it, because I've learned that memes capture so much and can express so much. Like, I could talk about this picture like it's 1,000 words and make this whole presentation about Steve Harvey's face. And how, you know, these memes are bleeding through reality, yet I kind of want to keep it moving on. So, last episode, we were talking about Plato's Shark Tank Titanic. And I really wanted to upgrade that and add a few visuals here. And now it's Plato's AI Shark Tank Cave Titanic, pending to change. Because we have this false force that's guiding us where it wants us to go, because it's a vampiric force that needs real people to power the Titanic. And yet, it's purposefully crashing into more icebergs. Because in this analogy, I realize there isn't just an iceberg. Yeah, there's like a lot of big events in this, yet it's just one thing after the other. It's kind of the slow squeeze. It's the slow sinking of this ship. It's not just going to be all at once. And it's going to just keep kind of going downhill. And that's kind of where the chaos and the sharks and the water come in. And my whole idea was this, is that we can learn from this whole ship and experience and come together and put together all of our talents, and we can build a miniature version of the Titanic, kind of get some distance away from it, and help people that are coming out of the system in the ship that's getting worse and worse and worse, and save them from getting eaten by the sharks and the chaos, and it just being pandemonium. Because people are going to get kind of weird around all the sharks and pandemonium, in my opinion. and just we can write a better story than that. So keep that in mind as we're moving on as well. And I found this comment here. There's this really interesting dichotomy going on right now that about people creating content with AI. Because a lot of people see it as talentless, that you're only putting in prompts, yet a lot of other people are realizing that this is kind of the beginning of the ultimate way to express imagination and creativity. And a lot of people kind of want to gatekeep that because they had to put in all this work in sweat and tears to bring things to life before, and not just type it in and it magically just comes to life. And I get both sides of it, yet I don't think you should hate it, love it, or try to hold it back just because you think someone, tried to gatekeep the effort you put into making imagination come to life. Because I can respect both sides of it, yet I want to see both come to life. That's a loaded one. Anyway, something I really want to talk about close to me that's a positive that almost brought a tear to my... It kind of did bring a tear to my eye because I was just kind of imagining like me replicating this in my own way. That this is in World War II in the Pacific Coast Campaign, which is kind of really near where I am in the world as well. And I got a lot of weird links to it. And that these Japanese officers were taken as prisoners of war, and they were describing in their journals what it was like to be with the Americans, and that all these Japanese had all these problems because at the beginning of World War II, mainstream opinion, the Japanese, when they started Pearl Harbor, were already basically falling apart because they had added in all these islands, yet they didn't have the infrastructure or the fuel to maintain it all. So they brought all these soldiers out to all these islands, and they couldn't resupply them, so the soldiers were just left there in a lot of cases, just basically to build their own tombs and wait for the Americans coming to bury it on their way to Japan. And that a lot of them would get picked up along the way and have all these problems with them, like scurvy, and they were going about how the Americans were treating them, and that the standard of living on these American ships, and even the submarines underwater, were better than their own living conditions, even for the officers. And that they had hot water underwater and beds to sleep in, and this just blew their minds because they weren't even close to that standard of living. And one of the reasons that we won is because Japan, for every soldier, had one person producing equipment for them. And America had 17 people on average producing equipment for every soldier. And the equipment was so much better. So we could just drown people in equipment. And that's kind of what we did in every way. And that, along the way, it wasn't perfect, but we also had our humanitarian side. And that it made Japanese people cry on these ships because they were giving them ice cream as prisoners of war. And that's just kind of my dream. If the world keeps going the way it is and I build self-sufficient hobbit homes, that I can, give people their humanity back with this food and this technology and the standard of living that they didn't think was around anymore, except for in some twisted billionaire's bunker somewhere. And they don't want to go there. And I kind of just wanted to talk about Snowpiercer here, the movie I talked about earlier, that on this self-sufficient train they made to withstand the world freezing, they have all these different atriums, like one that's a garden, one that has a bunch of chickens, one that's an aquarium, and they have it in perfect balance, and they get to eat the excess of the balance so they can maintain the ecosystem and keep it healthy and thriving, because we're kind of at our point now where the ecosystem's too full, and there's not enough opportunities anymore. Like if this fish tank was way too full, it would just start collapsing in on itself. So you have to keep the balance between the two. And if you do that, you can, because you're always going to have chickens that die. And if the system's good enough, you can just recycle those chickens back into the system in whatever way have you and keep it going. And also a big thing of mine is I like watching videos about these giant cooking operations, like feeding 5,000 people on an aircraft carrier, or a lot of other places around the world where they have thousands of workers they need to feed all at one time, and how they do these giant batches. And especially on aircraft carriers and submarines, because they have to take these industrialized settings and put them in a very small area and keep them going 24/7 and just output to a huge amount of people. So those people can then go do highly specialized jobs to keep the whole ship running. And if we look at the hierarchy of needs, water, food, warmth, and rest, security, and safety are all at the bottom. And those are all going to become the things that are hardest to maintain in an increasingly chaotic world. So that's where I want to start. And once you get past that, you can get into all the philosophy and the government and working together and trying to make everyone happy once their core needs are met. And that's my biggest focus, because I wanted to talk about the Matrix here, that when Neo is spat out of the system, there was already Zion and the Nebuchadnezzar to pick him up in the sewer. Yet, I've said it before, I don't know of a place I can really go that doesn't have a lot of weirdness around it, and that's accessible, kind of like Neo could in the Matrix. And also this huge balance between the food standards, that one of the reasons Cypher left the Matrix or went back to the Matrix in the first place and betrayed everyone is so he could have his steak back, so he could have his fancy food back, because he was tired of just eating crappy food every day, and how psychologically impactful good diet and security is. And securing your own oxygen mask so you can help others. And I hope to one day be at the point where even if it's chaotic and the whole plane is crashing around me, that I can still put masks on others and give them awesome food and things like that. And same with the Mad Max idea, if we just move it even further towards more chaos. And I don't want to be too much of a downer yet. If that's what's on the menu, I want to bring a bunch of amazing food to it and bring happiness and give people their souls back in whatever way I can and give them hope. And I think food's one of the best ways to do that, in my opinion. And I briefly wanted to talk about Evan Almighty here, because this is kind of the flip side of Bruce Almighty. It was they're not directly related, like a prequel and a sequel, but Morgan Freeman's God in both of those. And he gives Jim Carrey a test in this movie, and it's more based upon his individual choices, kind of like The Mask, like his imagination's brought to life, and it's this test to see if he can be a moral being and look after others and care for the world. And this idea is in Loki that we go back to, that this trickster god ended up becoming the god of storytelling and remaking reality, kind of almost like Bruce Almighty, and trying to find a better story for people and just looking over them. And I wanted to make a point here that the reason Loki had to remake reality was because chaos kept increasing. And I had a lot of Whales synchronicities lately that we might be in the dream of whales, weirdly enough. They have the biggest brains that we know of, so it kind of makes sense. And I found this article that the whales songs, especially with blue whales, have dropped by nearly 40% because the chaos is increasing. So we're seeing it even there. And this idea about surviving the reset of this reality or this dream as it goes back to something better. Because it's going to rebalance itself naturally. And it's about all the human beings and the animals and the sentience and the consciousness trying to minimize the trauma as much as possible. That's at least what I'm trying to do. And that was the idea of Evan Almighty. That instead of doing whatever he wants, it's more about, will you put your needs below the needs of the community so that they can survive this phase shift because you were warned. Kind of like the idea of Noah. And I've actually named this whole channel Arx Rex. I was originally going to name it Ark Rex, like the Ark. Yeah, I changed it to Arx with an X because it's more of a fortress. Because I don't think we're going to need a boat this time. Yet, I'm open to ideas and synchronicities. Because we're in the water world with whales right now. I don't think we're going to get flooded again. I don't think there's enough land mass for that. There'd be like 2 mountains in Africa still sticking up in like the Himalayas as well. Like, it'd be too much water. So, and I've talked about before the dualistic cycle and how it even relates to whales and sandworms and seeing through time and space and choosing the best path for humanity, that it's related to the desert and the water world and how it changes from one to the other in this Chosen One story. So I wanted to talk about this movie called The Corner Room. And I think about this movie a lot, actually. And it has this actor whose name I forget, and he starts at this office. And on the side right there it says, "Think about the floor." And it's just this crazy office where he doesn't fit in, and he's trying to be cool at every turn. And he's not, and he's kind of rejected by everybody. And one day, he finds this room that no one's in, and it makes him feel powerful. It makes him feel respected, with authority, that he's cool. And I kind of wanted to go back to, this room looks exactly like a show called Mad Men that he made years earlier, the real-life actor that plays both actors, where he's very respected. All the women love him. He becomes the boss of his building and very respected. And you go back to this movie, and it's the exact opposite. No one respects him. He's at the bottom of the totem pole. And it turns out this room, no one else can see. He's just standing in the corner next to an elevator. And we talked about elevators last episode, about how they link realities or levels of the mind of God. So he's trying to tune out somewhere else because he doesn't like this reality. And eventually they don't want him there anymore because it's weirding everyone out. And he's not being a people person and respecting other people's opinions. And being very selfish in his little room he made in his mind. And I kind of wanted to relate it to this movie called Master and Commander. Because in this movie, this main character is very respected, and he basically goes out on this grand adventure to make his dreams come true, and has all these archetypes I was just talking about. Yet Family Guy made a joke called Masturbator and Commander, where the main character never comes out of his room because he's obviously busy with something. And it kind of reminded me of The Corner Room, because he's just standing in the corner with his eyes closed, not talking to anybody. And it's very similar to this activity right here. And also, if we're talking about imagination being brought to life, this might be one of the reasons this is so prevalent in our society and being pushed on the youth as well, especially with these black tablets that we all have access to. Because I know for myself that my parents just gave me blind access to the internet when I was a kid, and I saw all kinds of things even when I was like 10 years old when I started looking. And, I wouldn't do the same thing to someone else and have those cycles start. And one of the reasons I want to talk about this is to hopefully help people in the future and warn them of things like this and how symbiotic this is with everything that I'm talking about as well. And I kind of want to go back to a music video I was talking about earlier called All on Red, where if you press this button, it changes reality itself. And the main reason this guy does it is to go from a loser to a hero, or a nobody to a somebody, and will change reality around him, the whole reality itself around him, to do it. And how it's related to like Looney Tunes and all these crazy imaginary ideas. And he brings it to life. So now he's the popular person on stage that everyone's looking at dancing to his song. Yet when he shines his light, now the dark can see him as well. And the cycle's reverted. And I just want to make a quick point right here at the beginning. These people on the stage right here that are behind him and following his will as he presses the button are these demons right here in the crowd. So they flipped it. The people that were being controlled now are the controllers. And there's a good and bad side to that, yet it's this dualistic cycle of who gets the power to recreate reality. And I would say it's pretty obvious that it's not going in a very good way right now. So it needs to balance towards something good. And I wanted to talk about the Green Lanterns from DC comic books and how they're about bringing light to darkness and overcoming fear. And they can bring their very imagination itself to life and however they see fit. And it's kind of these green plasma rings the light itself that does this, and if they pass a moral test, the ring will find them and give them these superpowers. And I believe I've mentioned it before that the Flash gives himself his own superpowers from the future, because he can bend time and space if he runs fast enough with his electric plasma energy, and he even resets a lot of timelines, and there's many movies about that, and it's very much like Back to the Future, and Back to the Future is linked to plasma as well, shooting from the sky, this blue plasma arc right here that can change time and space itself, and how if you change the story to the wrong thing, it just causes all this continuous chaos, and you have to get back to the source and figure out what did it. And I kind of wanted to briefly talk about, I watched this movie recently called Spawn, where the super soldier sent to hell for all of his crimes, and the devil basically needs him to be his ultimate super soldier, because the devil's basically like the ultimate vampire. Like, he's not going to do it himself, so he needs to find the perfect one to lead his armies. And he gives them like this, you can see in his eyes, like this blue plasma power, or green plasma power. And they also have these demonic Nephilim clown characters that can shapeshift into demons. And that's one of the main characters in this movie. And kind of the demonic side, and I kind of wanted to bring that to the archetype of clowns. There's Killer Clowns in Outer Space, which was a movie made a long time ago. And how in that movie they're reptilian clowns, so it's blending even more of these archetypes together. And there's a lot of conspiracies about these that compare the Nephilim to clowns and red hair and being tall. And I'm a tall ginger too, so that likes to joke around a lot, so it's very interesting, very close at home for me. So I was kind of talking about this earlier, and I'll get back to it now, that the devil gives him these powers, yet he decides he doesn't want to follow the devil's will and open this portal for all the demons to invade Earth. And he just takes the powers for himself and does good with them and starts redeeming his soul. And it's represented by this green plasma that allows him to shapeshift his costume into whatever he wants it to be. So like he can have a bunch of blades come out of his hand. So it literally makes his imagination come to life. As Hollywood brought this imagination to life and to a black screen, and maybe that'll come further to life. And back once again to Harry Potter wands, and Hollywood's named after the Hollywood wand, and I keep talking about over and over and over, and it even talks about King Arthur right here and the wizard Merlin and bringing things to life. And that's the whole point of Arthur Pendragon, is using his mind to bring his imagination to life and change the whole world around him. And we keep coming back to this theme of embracing your shadow, of embracing this demon to build a better world, that you can redeem your shadow. And this is talked about in all this Eastern philosophy, in this Netflix anime called Devilman May Cry I've talked about, where he's gets possessed by this demonic spirit, but he's the one that wants to help and save humanity from all the other demons, because in the end, it's about what's on the inside that matters, not what's on the outside. And why we have all this pre-programming. And if you don't overcome these inner demons, they might overcome you one day. And the same idea with all kinds of consumption. What you're physically eating, what you're mentally eating, or consuming, or drinking. And we'll get to the drinking part later on. And I talked about this in Annihilation as well, that people's vibes in this changed environment when this meteor falls from space, that whatever their vibe is will change them. So if her vibe's like a plant, she'll become a plant. And that happens to a lot of people. And I kind of want to make a sideway tangent here to a movie called The Menu that spoke a lot to me. And I've been talking a lot about food and serving people food in chaotic times, but also the flip side of the coin of those. So this movie is about this super fancy restaurant that's basically made for rich people. And it's on this self-sufficient island, which is very interesting, because all the food there is the best of quality. And it's just so ironic that the good and the evil people both want the best quality of food. And the good people want to share it with everybody, and the bad people want to hoard it all on their private islands and not share it with everybody, and just kind of just keep doing it over and over and over. And he basically made a cult on this island. On the outside, it looks hyper productive and awesome, and they're making the top quality food and having all these rich people come there. Yet their entire lives have to be dedicated to this. Like, they don't have their own free time. They've just been serving the gratifications of these rich people this entire time. So basically, this guy loses it and wants to put them, all the rich people, on the menu. So all the people he invited there were specifically chosen because they were very selfish and greedy and had this bad vibration. And then he basically turns them all into s'mores and lights the whole place on fire. And that's kind of his revenge. And the main character was the only real one there, and she wasn't even supposed to be there. And it was kind of funny. She made a point that none of the food was real. It's all these reductions, and they turn it into a foam or a paste, and it looks like a steak, but it's actually like a vegetable they cut up and pureed and reconstituted, and they put a glaze on it. So it's all this like witchcraft of food to make it something that doesn't even seem real. So the chef, as one last thing, makes her like a real, it's fake because that's fake American cheese on it, but what we know is real, and lets her go. Yeah, she can escape this closed off island system and go out and live her life because she didn't have the same vibration as everybody else. And it kind of made me think about the Camp of Saints, because the idea of it is that all the good vibration people would go to the same place, and all the evil people around it would get burned. And that's like the whole plot of that movie, so that the good people could go move on and have great lives. And this brings me to a movie called The Conspiracy. And this movie is very interesting, and it's going to be kind of hard to talk about this because the way they film this, there's just so many different layers that you have to add on top of each other to kind of get the message they're trying to tell you. Because they blur it in a way so you don't really know where to draw the line between fiction and reality. So to start out with, the poster of this has all these different topics on the right, like the Federal Reserve, World War I, and the Taurus Club, and that's the main focus of this movie. And it's filmed kind of like a found footage film, the Blair Witch Project, if you know what that means. So it's like someone has a camcorder and they're moving it around, and it's like they didn't use big fancy cameras to film this. And they're making a documentary about this conspiracy guy, and he has all of his newspaper clippings out on the wall, and he's telling them about all this stuff and about being a free, sovereign individual. And they have this style that they'll interview all these different people and cut between the story. And these people right here are like C-list actors. So these are not actual people. Well, they are actual people, but these are actors pretending to be people in a found footage documentary. So there's a lot of layers to that. So the two people making the documentary can't find the original guy anymore. Yet they find all the conspiracy stuff in the trash. So this guy goes through and puts it all back up on the wall, and he starts figuring out what this guy was looking into. And they end up finding out that it's this secret society, and they even start talking to someone from the secret society. And it's interesting because this guy is specifically telling them that it's part of their policy to subtly let out little breadcrumbs about their club so that they get a little publicity here and there to kind of draw people in. And the big thing about the society is it's based around Mithras or Mithra and sacrificing that divine bull that I've been talking about. And this was the movie that kind of made me look into that a lot, or the amount I have. And I wanted to make a point here that in this movie they have this guy that has books about this Mithraic cult, and here it says Mysteries of the Unconquered Sun, that I found this Amazon listing for this guy's book, Beck on Mithraism, and I just found that very interesting that this guy was actually legit in the movie. And it seems like there's a few people in this movie that are actually, like, their titles are actually real. Like, this is an actor. This is an actor. This is an actor. This is an author in a movie pretending to be an actor who actually, I think, wrote these books, or at least has wrote books on Mithras, which is very interesting. And the main point I want to talk about this movie is this guy has this choice that he can go live his life, or he can go jump in the Shark Tank, like in the Titanic analogy earlier, and go find out if this thing's actually real. Because, like, yeah, the guy told us about it, but, like, is it actually real? So it's kind of hard to see here because the quality of this movie is not that great. And it's free on YouTube if you type it in. And it doesn't go well for them. They are the calf. And that's kind of why they put the breadcrumbs out there, so that you go into the Shark Tank to find out. Because they're hungry. And they're vampires, in my opinion. And they have a lot of these scenes, especially at the end of the movie, where there's basically both sides being portrayed. That there's people saying this is all crazy, but then there are people saying, like, yes, this is true. And especially people that they say are part of this club themselves are saying that they have these meetings. So it's very interesting, like, where do you actually draw the line between what's real and not? And the biggest point of this movie is the guy had two choices, because they kept talking about this guy who wanted to do his own off-grid thing and build his own community, but he instead chose to go in the Shark Tank. And it's very interesting, too, because I was talking about this with Severance last episode, because if you imagine that, you could say that, hey, didn't the main character jump in the Shark Tank in that movie? And I think it will be an interesting balance. I think it might be both in our case. Yet, because I want to build this place so that maybe later on, because I put everyone's else oxygen masks on after I put mine on, that I can maybe then go look in the Shark Tank, because that's like part of destiny and this big crazy story we're going to have. Yet, to do this first. And because this guy didn't do this first, he just gets gobbled up because he doesn't have a foundation of strength. In my opinion, anyway. Kind of back that analogy right here to visualize it. Like, he didn't build his self-sufficient boat. He just kind of jumped right in the ocean and just got gobbled up. And it didn't really help anybody. So, that's my opinion on that anyway. It makes me think about that a lot. So, I kind of wanted to bring this back to Paper Mario. And I was talking about this earlier. That he brings his imagination to life. And that this increasingly gets more chaotic, that his artificial creation kind of goes downhill from its original purpose because it wasn't really made with a pure heart, and he didn't really think it through very much either. And I didn't include a part because it's kind of weird and raunchy, but his brother Luigi gets a hold of the permanent marker that can change reality, and he adds the divine masculine to the divine feminine. So they're one being. And that made me think of Baphomet and how the Knights Templar, we were talking about earlier with Excalibur bringing imagination to life like a pencil. They're bringing this dark side of androgyny to life, combining the masculine and feminine in a dark way. And we're seeing that today, trying to combine the two in an artificial way, and then trying to make everyone else go with that vibration as well. And so Mario decides to burn it down. But the problem is that this creation wants to drag him back into this system, because this inverted two becoming one needs real life, needs real light to keep it going in the inferno it made for itself. And I kind of wanted to go to this idea of how in our reality we have all these. In the movies, it works out great. Like in Tenacious D, the Pick of Destiny, which is also relating the gender of masculine force and overcoming evil. In this green Pick of Destiny, that brings your imagination to life, or has been tied to that. And just combining that with the Minecraft movie, that your imagination can be brought back to life, and Jack Black plays the main character in both those, and how they overcome evil and save the world. and they have this battle with evil itself, yet they have this shirt of the Devil Tarot card, and they're the ones in chains. So in the movie, they overcome the evil, yet in real life, in the symbolism they promote, they didn't pass that test. And here he is on the Hall of Fame, the star, it's in concrete right here. And it's kind of crazy this when I was putting this presentation together, because we're going to get back this way at the end, and I didn't realize that the movie we're going to talk about in the end had to do with the Walk of Fame right here. And it's just, if we're having synchronicities about this, it's just kind of crazy, the implications of that. But how he's coveting this base thing, this base fame that isn't actually real. And how in Mario, we were just talking about, there's this thing called star power, which basically makes you invincible and kind of makes your imagination come to life, and how the hero a lot of times will save the day. And I kind of wanted to bring this back to Will Smith, because we were talking about with Men in Black in this Chosen One journey, that he goes in this concrete, and the Chosen One goes in it so that it can be controlled, kind of like another brick in the wall, because this vampiric system can't make that divine energy, this atom energy themselves. And I can't believe I talked about Men in Black without talking about the marble scene at the end, how it's basically all in the mind of God, and it's just fractally repeating itself, and how it all, you can think that as like a Cthulhu tentacle monster too. There's a good and bad side of that, but how we're in a dream of, a whale or a Cthulhu tentacle monster, and that's in a dream of something else, it's in the mind of something else, that's in the mind of something else, and, it just keeps going in the mind of something else, which is a huge part of the movie. With his alien pretending to be a person that's in the mind of God as well. And I just kind of want to go back to Will Smith here, and now he also chose to combine with the concrete and to be happy about that, to put his star power in the concrete, or this base place like the Authority Tunnel, so he could be its battery. And I kind of wanted to bring the, in the mind of God idea to also Independence Day, because Will Smith was in that movie as well, about these artificial beings that pilot other artificial beings, and with this fractal idea as well. And how in Pacific Rim you have these giant robots, but in their head they have two human beings piloting them. And there's this VR game so that you're piloting robots through the observer effect in their mind. So it's just more of the mind of God and it's self-repeating. How weird that is. So I kind of want to tangent real quick. So I found this music video a day after I made the last video, and it really bugged me, and I was trying to figure out why it bugged me so much. And it was that they were combining evil with about basically the most pure innocent thing you could imagine, which is like a cute little squirrel girl. And this song right here is very bad. It's about kidnapping people, taking drugs, and shooting them with a gun. And they relate that to this little girl, and she's dancing with the beat and doing the motion of shooting somebody as the lyric talks about it. So they're directly trying to relate this animated version with reality and combine these lifestyles, but in my opinion also hide behind it. Because I don't have a slide here, but we were talking about that with Men in Black the other day as well, about when they're doing the test that Jay shoots the little girl because she had quantum physics books and it didn't fit in with all these aliens around her, but it turned out he was right. And it's kind of the same thing right here, that evil's trying to hide behind this cutout of a little girl, because no one would suspect the little girl of being evil, in my opinion anyway. It kind of popped up in this as well. And even if they're not, they're correlating the two together, because you might ignore the evil for the cute part. And I found this quote: "Be careful who you feel sorry for. Some people wear a mask of innocence, but behind it they're masters of deception, playing the victim to hide their true intentions. It seems they're more than meets the eye." And I was also talking about how this idea of animated characters, and especially a little girl, is related to this demonic presence entering our reality. That not only that, we're shaping our entertainment itself around that, because a few episodes ago I was talking about how a lot of modern entertainment for young people, they're called VTubers, and they're real people that have these overlays that they design and program so that, like, imagine right now if I had like an animated drawing over myself and it looked like I was talking like I am right now, and they rig it to the motion so it'd be like following my hand motions that I'm doing right now. And they have whole shows around this, and how they decide to make themselves look like demon hybrids or human animal hybrids, like all kinds of stuff like that. And I was even talking about this in other mass media, because this one had like 2.5 million views, where there's this plasma portal that opens up with this red vibration, and this tentacle monster that looks like a little girl pops out to enslave the world. And how that's also related to dogs and Sirius as well, weirdly enough. And just how they're trying to cartoonize evil itself. And they're doing it with more shows than just this one, Has Been Hotel. But they're just doing it over and over and over, trying to make these demons itself, that if you saw them in real life, you would not want to connect yourself with them very much. Trying to make them look cute, or trick the average person to connecting with these without having a second thought about it. Because, like I said, if these things start becoming real, it's not going to be this great, amazing thing anymore, and it's going to start taking people over. And I really do care about the innocent people inside, because I just see my whole generation taking this hook, line, and sinker. Like, I'm seeing more and more people, like I saw one 2 days ago walking around with a fur tail sticking out of their butt. And, like, the little fox ears, and they're wearing a mask. And it's just like, you know, it's hard to say, like, seriously, like, what's going to happen if imagination becomes reality? But I mean, like, really, like, because that's what artificial intelligence is doing already. And, oh, geez, I forgot I put this here, because we were talking about earlier, this person's basically our version of the Truman Show, and how they made this thought egregore based upon Sonic the Hedgehog. And Sonic the Hedgehog, which I've talked about many times, is about merging dimensions and making imagination come to life. And how he made his own version of that. And how, like, that's the thing he's been talking about. And I didn't include it in here yet. Apparently there was a news article that he just broke and remade, because he has a charm around his neck right there that represents this thought egregore. And apparently he broke it and built it into something new. I don't know what he built it into, which is... The whole thing's very weird, but I was talking about glass breaking a lot the last couple episodes. And also how this relates to the apotheosis of Jesus, but not only that, Baphomet. You know, this inverted combining of everything. Because I didn't say it here, but he's also trying to be a female too. So combining the masculine and feminine into one being as well. And that's also right here on the left. That's also the Devil Tarot card as well. So, yeah. And also, I don't want to go too deep in it, but if you look on the right there, that this evil entity needs the innocence, you know, the purity of reality and light to survive. Like, that's what powers it. It's a vampiric entity. And when I was looking at this, I tried to type it in and find a picture. This was the AI. And it just blew me away. Because imagine this is like Truman, like from the Truman Show, and you're looking at a character breakdown. To the intentional corruption of the character Sonichu, within the fictional universe. Originally a simple protagonist, the character was warped to serve the wish fulfillment and increasingly dark fantasies of its creator, Christine Weston Chandler, formerly Kristen Weston Chandler. Like I said, he's trying to be female now. This change largely stems from the harassment Chandler received from internet trolls, which was then projected onto the comic's plot. So, the creator and the creation and the internet and artificial intelligence is all just merging together chaotically. And from the hero to the sociopath. And wish fulfillment and control, along with the idea guy and changing timelines. So it's all about imagination changing reality itself, but looking at the dark side of it and what happens to the cautionary tale. And I want to talk about this guy right here vaguely. That he's basically the biggest streamer in the world, and many young people would know his name. And that I don't know if his dad died. I just assumed because he made this video about it, because I don't really watch his videos. It's just kind of interesting because a lot of these famous people right now are just having their family drop like flies. And it just makes me wonder what the price of this greatness they have is. Because I was talking about him in the last episode. And in this movie right here, I was talking about earlier, The Lighthouse, imagination does come to life. And because this guy was focusing on these lustful ideas about mermaids and revenge, that it all comes true, and it ends up being a cautionary tale with a bad ending, because his imagination actually did come to life. It just seemed like a little totem to begin with, yet it had a lot more power behind it, because that's the power of your mind, or the light. And there might be more to this than meets to the eye. And we'll get back to the Transformers idea here later. But I really wanted to talk about the Mission Impossible movie really quick, because they have this technology in it where they can make a fake face that looks real, so they can disguise themselves, or kind of limited shape-shifting technology. And I wanted to make the point that this exists in the real life. And the CIA has made a point that they've been using this for like 30 years. And that if they're telling us now, who knows what they've been making this entire time, or what the new version of this is that they're not telling us about, and how complicated it might be. And I'm starting to look at more famous people as just actors, or a role that's being played, because they've had the technology for a while now that they could easily swap that role off. Like the president itself could be a role being played by many people. And recently, this is a famous guy named Drewski that went to a NASCAR rally and pretending to be a white guy. Like, they did just really good makeup on him, and he was there all day and sweating, and it still held on. Like, they're showing the public that they have really good makeup. And Robert Downey Jr. did this in Tropic Thunder as well, did this complete shift over. And he's saying here, I'm a dude playing a dude disguised as another dude. And it's like, they're doing the same thing, in my opinion. They're just going around. It's all just a giant puppet show. Because that's what these people do, is they're good at putting on plays and presentations for entertainment. And he's saying right here, you went full stupid, or you went full chaos. You never go full chaos. You never go full stupid. You want to find the balance in things. And this kind of brings me to cloning, because you have really good makeup, you have masks, but then I wanted to get to the idea of cloning as well, because I see that as the more advanced version of this. And Netflix has an amazingly funny movie about this that actually goes pretty deep for what it is. That there's all these clones in this underground facility underneath all these towns in America, and they're making all these clones to do their bidding. And I kind of want to relate that to Cabin in the Woods, because in that movie is kind of the same idea, but instead of clones of people, they were making clones of monsters, so that they could entertain the fallen angels that live below us, so they wouldn't have to come up and do it themselves. So, yeah, and I also wanted to talk about the movie Oblivion with Tom Cruise in it as well, that the aliens that come and try to take over Earth use Tom Cruise as like the perfect template to make a bunch of clones, so that the aliens don't have to come down and take over Earth themselves. They can just have a bunch of clones of Tom Cruise do it for themselves. And it seems like if you had this technology and you were a bunch of rich people without morals, you just have a bunch of movie stars you kept cloning, and you could have them around doing whatever. You could have one doing the movie, but you could have a bunch of them in a bunch of other places as well. And that made me think of Star Wars, because that's what the evil people in that movie did as well. They made these giant clone and robot armies to make this giant conflict so that they could rise to power and take over the world through all this subversion. And I want to talk about Mr. Beast right here, because he has all these different conspiracies about him, and people relate him to the devil and being evil and all that. Yet the one I'm interested here in is that there's a lot of different videos about that there might be clones of him. And it kind of makes sense with the same idea that he's creating all this entertainment. And they might have just created a bunch of different versions of him because it's easier to do that. And one of the main things he did was make a remake of the Squid Games. And the whole idea of the Squid Games is that real people are playing this game and being sacrificed so that the rich people can be entertained. So real people are dying so the rich vampires can be entertained. So this idea is playing over and over and over, but that they're using clones and disguises themselves to keep us distracted. And also not have to do it for themselves. And this was also the idea of the Hunger Games, because they created a giant domed environment just so they could put a bunch of poor people in there and have them fight to the death so a bunch of rich vampires could be entertained. This idea over and over. Same with Westworld. They created these humanoid robots and they put them in this world to keep giving them mind wipes and rebuilding them and resetting reality so a bunch of rich people can go in there, get their jimmies, and they'll just keep rebuilding them for the gratification of rich people. And I kind of want to talk about this here, that I saw this video that she had this wireless robot hand and it was crawling on the desk. And, we're bringing this imagination and technology to life. And that made me think of the Addams Family and back to the idea of Adam. Yet, recently there's been a reboot of the show Wednesday. And it's been interesting because, my family, who's very mainstream, and it just seems like they take the download step for step as well, has been watching this. So it's very interesting. But in that, they have the moving hand, which is the same as this robot hand and what it reminded me of. And I do food delivery right now, and Wendy's did a campaign right here about the Addams Family, and it says there's nothing happy about this meal. So it's like the meal of misfortune, and it's centered around death itself, because that's the whole idea of Wendy and the Addams Family, is just embodying death itself, in my opinion, at least symbolically. And that kind of takes me back to the show American Horror Story, because I believe it's the 10th season, it was about combining aliens and vampires so that they could make these human hybrids that could do their bidding. And this is also where I want to talk about the movie Together that came out. I saw this in the movie theaters recently. It was pretty wild. And I wanted to say I'm going to take these next slides from this channel right here. I don't know what those numerals are. But he makes a lot of these symbolism videos for movies. And I want to give him credit for that because he did it for these as well. So I don't want to say I stole this or I'm saying this is mine. But I don't have a better source to get these slides. So I want to use them as well and give him the credit right here. And also I wanted to make a point right here that at the very beginning of this episode, I was talking about a content creator that I was following that was acting all nervous and weird and not like himself. And I just want to say that he was one of the people I talked about in my very first video, and one of the people that set me on this path, and who I still to this day have a whole bunch of synchronicities with. And I do divide the information and who I get it from. Yet I do like to put those caveats there because I think we need to make the balance that, yes, you need to take the information. I think you know where I'm going with that. I just kind of wanted to say that I'm showing the information. I'm glad for the information that he made this, yet I can't say I know this person. So I'm not promoting it beyond the information itself. So you have to kind of disseminate it yourself from there. So back to this idea of yin and yang, the light and the dark, the two becoming one. Because this movie's hugely related to Sirius and the Two Towers and becoming one. And back to this idea of the dog as well and how it's connected to all of this. And also the Truman Show and how that's connected back to all of this. So the movie starts with these two dogs that merge into one. And this reminded me of the Thing movie, because that's how it started. The alien pretended to be a dog, and then it wanted to merge with everybody. And that's kind of what's happening here, is this dog starts merging with another dog. And that was the first indicator that this was going to happen. And the main character right here in one of the first scenes he's in, he's wearing a shirt of a dog looking in a mirror. So it's relating the main character here to Sirius as well. And later in the movie, they go on this walk in nature, and they fall down this hole in the ground that has this bell right here of the sun. And there's also so you have the good version of the sun and the bad version of the sun as well, because there's good and bad versions of sun worship. And they're stuck in this hole for a while, and he ends up drinking from this black pit that looks like the abyss. And it makes this point of as above, so below, so he's kind of combining with his shadow in this point, at least symbolically. And a little girl later on makes a sketch of her dog, and that's how one of the main characters starts getting clues about all this, because they drink the water as well. Yet, I wanted to make this idea of the sketch, because this movie came out recently called Sketch, where this girl drops this book where she's putting all of her repressed feelings into. So there's all these nasty things in here about what she wants to do to people, and it's not very kind. And it drops in this magical lake that brings it to life. When we were just talking about water in the last movie. So it's bringing all these monsters to life, and it's going after her friends and family that she had all these resentments towards. And that just made me think a dream scenario, because Nicolas Cage has this power to be in anyone's dreams, yet when he starts to lose control of it, all of his repressed anger is being shown to people in their dreams. So he's like attacking them in their dreams, even though consciously he doesn't want to, or he doesn't let himself, because they're all buried down in his subconscious. So her subconscious feelings actually come to life, and then they start drawing into the magic pool as well. So they start creating all these horrible monsters, and that's kind of back to this idea I was talking about with Mario and this pen that can bring things to life. And there's in other things as well. And this idea of fire, because that was the answer in Mario as well. Yet, this little kid can bring his imagination to life too, and that's kind of what saves the day, is that the little girl, brings tentacle monster powers to life, and that's what saves the day. So it's very interesting, is what you might see as a monster saves the day. And her dad, who couldn't accept any of this, or that imagination was going to come to life, ends up, they end up embracing, and they're all happy, and it's a happy ending. And this idea of plasma in the sky, or in the minds of God, or neurons in your mind, yet I wanted to link that to Aurora Borealis, because that's plasma in the sky, backlit with the mind of God. And in the unicorn movie, that's when the unicorns came and all this imagination came to life, was when the Aurora Borealis came, and it's moving further and further south. I haven't seen it yet. So later on in the movie, there's this scene with the glass and two becoming one. And as this movie goes on, because they drank the water, they're becoming more and more attracted to each other, whether they like to or not. So in this scene, she's like almost bursting through the glass violently, yet there's a barrier between the subconscious and the conscious at this point in the movie, and it's represented by that. And in this scene in the movie, she's holding this stump right here because they're like being pulled together, and she doesn't want to be pulled together because she's afraid of becoming one. And they eventually do, and they kind of do it in a happy way. This movie leaves you in a very weird way at the end. But I just wanted to quickly talk about this two becoming one, because especially in Asian comic books, they go over this idea, because I've talked about Chainsaw Man many times, that he has this dog demon that wants to see his moral dreams come to life, so they merge and he gets superpowers, which was the same as Devilman Crybaby, where he merges with a demon, but it gives him superpowers, but because he's moral, he can go do moral things with it. And also back to this idea about what's on the inside that might be coming on the outside as well, and what you're consuming. And I just kind of wanted to go over those slides once again in that context. And it's kind of interesting that during the scene of them merging, there's no internet, yet when they finally merge, the connection and the internet finally come back. So it's a change in the system, and they become one being. And it's in this point, there's a few people that they can't fully merge, so they become like these weird hybrid monster things. Yet, a few people can actually merge and become one being. And it's just kind of a hypothesis of mine that I'm not saying it's for everybody, but I think that there's a good version of the divine masculine and feminine in one body. And that's kind of in our subconscious, and that's what a lot of people, I think, want to reach for, and why we're seeing that appearing in our society so much. Yet there's also the dark side of it as well. It's just all about your intention and it coming to life. And that this was also talked about in the Annihilation movie, about this meteor that comes to space and changes reality to whatever your vibration is. This was a movie where you could turn into plants as well, that I talked about earlier in this presentation. Yeah, it does it with the main character as well. So it can copy her, because it's this being from the void that can just reflect a lot like this AI entity that you could think of. So I want to talk about this movie called The Substance, because it's kind of like the flip side of Together. And just from an entertainment standpoint, I have not been entertained by a movie like this since I've seen it in almost like a year and a half. Like, it made my jaw drop, just the way they filmed it. It's a very visceral, raw, symbolic movie that has a lot of truth in it. Yet it's done very close up. It makes you try to feel things, and I very much like that. And I'm still waiting for a movie to knock my socks off like this movie right here did, in the way it did. Just personal opinion of mine anyway. Because I have a lot of movies that have a whole bunch of truth in them, this one included, yet very few movies draw me in like this one did and like make you feel involved, because the camera angles and the way they shoot it is very unique to this movie, or at least very few movies do it like this movie does in such a great way. So anyway, it starts out where they inject this egg, and back to the generative egg idea, and it becomes 2 from 1. And we were talking earlier about the KFC egg, and also from Ready Player One, the generative egg that can reshape reality. And in the KFC commercial, it's kind of the bad version where they turn people into food so they can be eaten by vampires. Yet in the good version, in Ready Player One, the good people get to remake reality so everyone has their paradise. So it's kind of like two sides of the coin here with the generative egg. And right here, one of the first scenes is the Hollywood star. And they show its construction, but that one day, no one's going to care, and they're just going to drop food on it, and it's just going to be all cracked and dusty. And you can't maintain that fame. Yet there's some people that want to. And the main character, it says right here, sparkle your life. And this is her show. And it brings me back to the idea of vampires and The Shining, shining your light to bring your reality and dreams to life. And she's a person that does like workout videos, and she's getting to the point in her life where she can't keep doing that. And her boss is saying, we need to find somebody new. And he has this one eye symbolism here. And later on, he's eating shrimp, and he's saying people are just people. Renewal is inevitable. So he's basically telling her she has to go. And at 50, it all stops because she just reached 50. And during the scene, he's just consuming the shrimp, and it does it really close up and viscerally, that shows that he's just this mindless consumer. And I want to talk about Area 51 real quick, and I just found this meme while I was doing it, and it's just crazy that it combines aliens, which I've talked about, which is basically this being that needs you to propagate itself, and relating it to dogs, and also Area 51. So I just found that was crazy. And, children, that whole balance, you have the cute good side of it and the evil dark side of it. And also to Alien Earth right there. I'll go to that in a second. I want to talk about Area 51 because there's a conspiracy about it that, symbolically anyway, that when you get to 50%, that's kind of the change. That's when you reach equilibrium and balance. And it's at 51% where you tilt the scale towards one way or the other. So if you have 50% of the population thinking of one vibe or the other, or 50% of it thinking with a good vibe, the entire reality will start shifting towards that good vibe because it's now at a positive level. So the idea of Area 51 is that it's this evil plan that's rising because they have everyone's attention and focus towards all these negative things. And that's what's going to come to life, and that's what their plan is. And that's kind of the symbolism here with Alien Earth, a show I've been watching. And the last episode was actually tonight, and I'm going to watch it after this. Funnily enough, because there's a lot of symbolism in that. Kind of like this. Because the idea is like, what happens if the lambs wake up? Or flip the system that we know right now. Kind of like the menu that I was talking about earlier. So, the main character is going to the doctor, and they're basically saying, you're a good candidate for this weird treatment we have. And she gets this video for a thing called the substance. And it says, have you ever dreamt of a better version of yourself? One single injection unlocks your DNA. And it will create a vision that will release another version of yourself. This is the substance. And it says, you are the Matrix. Everything comes from you. Everything is you. And you can make a better version of yourself from you. You just have to share. And I put the little vampire in there. You have to share. There's a good side of it too. And that you have this balance of 1 week for the old version and 1 week for the new version. A perfect balance. And the one and only thing not to forget is you are one. And I kind of wanted to include the the American Horror Story Area 51 alien hybrids. Don't forget, you are one. You can't escape from yourself. And both the hands clap together. Like I said, it works out in the end. So, it shows her later on with this snow globe, and that's supposed to be her, and it's relating it that she's in this artificial environment, a lot like the Truman Show. And so I put this slide in right here because I'm getting the slides for this movie. And the very next one I go to that I didn't know was there has a dog barking as she's going to get the substance, and it just is another fourth wall breaking serious Truman Show moment. While I'm putting it in the very presentation itself again. So she gets to this alleyway where it has the two eggs becoming one. And it kind of shows her shadow self here, at least symbolically. And I wanted to make the point on the right, or on the left right here, it has this poster of cockroaches and how it's related to the number 33. And how this doesn't want cockroaches. Yet I talked about in the last presentation that the cockroaches could be combined with the main moral character, and that they come from the deep, from the subconscious. Yet, if you stand up for these beings that most people step on and don't care for, that you can be the chosen one because you have this empathy that you can give to even cockroaches. And I want to make a point about shrimp, because in this movie, The Substance, her boss was eating shrimp earlier, talking about how people are disposable. And if we're in a whale's dream, relating all the ideas back to that you might be able to gain lucid power over the dream because you morally care about things like shrimp, or the things that can't defend themselves, like pretty bunnies, shrimp. I think cockroaches don't really defend themselves. So anyway, away from that tangent, she goes into this fancy room right here, and she gets the kit, the substance, and this ominous music's playing as she's getting ready to use it. And I just wanted to make the point right here that the change comes in this vial of water. And we were talking earlier about the water in the movie Together that started this changing process. And in the movie The Crazies, it all started because their water was infected by this plane that fell. And all the chemicals got into the water and made everyone crazy. So it was this kind of repeating theme of consumption. So she takes it, and instead of the eyes coming together like was in the last movie, the eyes come apart in this movie. And there's this music as basically her minds become one, and it has like this plasma heart flame. And basically she's reborn. Yet there's still her old body, which gets stitched up. And she basically, if I remember right, they basically have to swap spinal fluid. And if they do it perfectly, they both can maintain a good life. Yet the problem is she wants to be a star and she doesn't really care. So the original lady, her body starts rotting away because she's not respecting the balance. And so she's trying to call this company saying, like, I don't know what she's thinking. She's not respecting me. And the company's like, remember, there is no she in you. You are one. Respect the balance. And they hang up on her. So this goes on, and it's not going well. They are not respecting each other. She's like super aging real fast. And to combat that, she makes all this food and eats it right before her alter self's like big dance performance. So her alter self like locks her in there for months, and she like turns into like this old zombie lady. And it doesn't go well, and she ends up killing her original self. So like this thought egregore that came to life wanted to take over like her life, like this vampiric entity that she made. And it doesn't go well. She just kind of starts mutating, and it reminded me a lot of The Thing. So like the bad version of the shape-shifting Will. And she still tries to go on the stage and be beautiful, and that does not work out. And just symbolically, it kind of goes back to this idea of star power and worshiping this concrete star and like your essence being sucked up by it in this system. And that's kind of how the movie ends. Yet I kind of wanted to bridge this back because that's very dark. But kind of back to the light, that in the first Matrix movie, the evil's defeated because Neo jumps into Agent Smith. So like he dives straight first, the two becoming one. And the evil can't handle that and is broken apart. And the day is saved. Yet he comes back. And, that's the final showdown between good and evil. And he ends up winning with the Jesus plasma pose that looks like a T. And that can reset reality, which is also what happens in the Matrix movies. And is represented by the good version of the sun. So we're going to kind of wrap it up with the movie Transformers 1. Oh, this movie has so much symbolism in it. And I've been wanting to talk about this one for a long time. So the movie begins, and he's being told this legend, and there's this blue plasma light in the center of it. And it turns out that this is a giant robot. And you can kind of think of this like in the mind of God. Earlier I talked about this Japanese animation called Gurren Lagann, where this kid has a robot that he pilots, but the robot can pilot other robots, and at the end of the show, he's this giant green plasma being that has like that inside his head, if you can see it right there, is a robot, but inside that robot's head's another robot, and there's like 12 different robots in that robot that all goes down to this little guy piloting this giant universal robot. And so back to the Transformers, that this giant universal robot turns into the very planet they all live on and gives it energy and life. And where all these original prime archetypal beings came from. Yet all those prime archetypal beings or angels are gone, and it's just reality left. Yet he's inserting himself into that story, yet to him it just seems like a story, like this fairy tale. And he's a miner. They're basically being enslaved and forced to mine the earth to meet these quotas. And I wanted to bring that back to the Minecraft movie and how miners, going through the earth is what bridges the gap between realities, and how it's also related to children because they have this pure generative force and imagination. Children have the purest imagination, and how it's linked to these bridging these worlds and what we think is just imagination or a video game, yet the truth might be in the video games like it was in the Matrix movies. So later on, they have this race, and all the rich people can transform, while all the poor people can't, and they're forced to work in the mines. So the rich people are having this big fun show spectacle and having fun and playing games, while all the normal people have to toil away. And right here, where their heart is, there's nothing. And that's where they're supposed to have something that lets them transform, that gives them superpowers. But that was taken away from them so they could be enslaved. And later on, they join the race, and they just keep making the point of miners. How, burrowing through reality itself to change it. kind of like how we're doing the blockchain right now in Bitcoin mining and how that's related to AI making reality real. It all kind of merges together. And how a lot of these chosen one archetypes are related to like having a kid inside. Like they never let that part go. They saw that childish part of them. They're not that serious. I could go on about that, but and also the person you'd least expect. That's a huge one of them as well. So later on, it makes a point that they're living underground. So they're in this artificial environment and world so that they can be slaves, and that they finally get to the outside real world where the sun is, and they find these animals there that are robots. And it just kind of made me think that I think the line between consciousness in a robot and what we think of as like a human flesh robot might not be as different as we think if they have similar receptors, and that it is all one. Like it all goes back to the same thing as well. Like we are all in the mind of God, whether we see it as a robot or not. So eventually they find out this upper world, they're not alone, and there are these alien beings that are keeping them enslaved, and the rich people of their society are basically bowing down to the aliens, mining out their world and giving all the fancy stuff to the aliens so they can maintain the status quo, because the rich people, get to be rich and enslave everybody else. So the Transformers eventually find like this big mountain. This is basically like the Garden of Eden at the center of the world that I keep talking about. And they find this cave that goes down into this pit. It's like going into the abyss almost. And there's a lot of symbolism around this as well, but I don't really want to go too heavily into that. That they kind of like find this cave of all these ancient heroes and archetypes that they thought weren't real. So like right here, this guy is finding all these fairy tales in the beginning of the movie that he didn't think were real, or at least he'd never find, kind of like the Garden of Eden, but yet they find it. And here they are given the ability to transform, or given superpowers, or eternal life, or imagination coming to life, because they can now transform. And their bodies are transformed with this blue plasma energy, and they get new bodies and they're healed. And they gain all these superpowers, even if they don't know how to use them yet. And they're very awkward and they crash around a lot at first. Yet this plasma also brings out your inside vibration. So this guy that was friends and happy earlier is becoming all mean and angry and starting to dominate people, which was not his outside vibe earlier, but all this repression that he kept up inside is starting to bottle out. So it gets towards the end of the movie, and basically he's cornered the rich person that's been enslaving their society, and he tries to kill him, yet the good guy steps in the way, and Optimus Prime gets blasted. And it's kind of funny that the main character hero archetype is basically trying to save the rich vampire from getting shot, because that's not the right way to do it. So these two guys have been friends the entire movie, and they started out that way, yet this guy's inner soul is taking over him, and he lets his friend go. And he falls down into the earth, and it's filled with all these plasma beams, and it just kind of made me think of the mind of God, that he's kind of like falling through these dimensions, while his friend, being possessed by this red plasma energy up top, is gonna get rid of this guy and take his heart out to gain superpowers. Yet the good version of this, Optimus Prime, goes inside, once again, the mind of God, and turns out in the center of the world's this giant blue plasma source. And as this is happening, the villain, Megatron's ripping apart the old vampire so he can be the new vampire that rules the earth. And here Optimus Prime's making this blue plasma T-pose as he's entering this big ball of plasma. And this big ball of plasma has basically the Akashic records inside of it. It has all these old archetypes and angels in it. And I just wanted to make a point that there's this show called Avatar: The Last Airbender, where this guy gets superpowers and, it alludes to mind of God and changing reality itself. And he can see all his ancestors that had the superpower as well. And this is in another Japanese show that I've talked about earlier, that this character right here that has this blue-green plasma powers is called One for All. and he gets all the memory and experience of everyone that came before him, and it's all lumped up into this superpower to save the world. And there's an evil version of that called All for One, and he can take other people's superpowers and give them to other and build like a giant evil army. And Optimus Prime gets the good heart, the matrix of leadership, so he can go on to build this moral society, while Megatron rips this guy's heart out like a vampire so he can get his superpowers, and he does so. And Optimus is once again reborn with blue plasma like they were earlier, and it kind of like shows his soul beaming out of his eyes, in the mind of God. So on the surface, all the evil people are going crazy and they're just blowing everything up, because that's what evil does. It wants chaos and just to burn everything down. And Optimus is flying back through the mind of God as a blue plasma bolt and flies back through their reality. So like a neuron. And it allows his imagination to come to life as he enters this story, and he ends up saving the day. And because he's a good guy, he lets Megatron go and be exiled. So now they have a golden age of superheroes, and he gives everyone the ability to have superpowers that will eventually lead back to the Dark Age. So it's like this cyclical cycle, but now they've just saved themselves from the Dark Age, and now they can have this age full of superpowers. And I kind of wanted to tie this back to a movie called The Dead Don't Die that I talked about earlier, that with this, the moon unleashes all this plasma and the sky looks all weird, kind of like the Aurora Borealis, and the dead come back to life, which is a theme like in a lot of these shows. Yet the main thing of this movie is that some of the characters know they're in a movie. And this character here is saying, it's okay, I know because I read the script, like how this is going to end. And a lot of the main characters in this movie, the big point of the movie was that the modern society wasn't ready for this crazy super world with all these monsters and superpowers, and that most people don't make it. And the few people that do were the ones that detached themselves from society and started becoming self-sufficient and were watching the signs and how the animals were behaving and weren't smack dab square in the middle of everything. And it kind of brings me back to the idea of this Titanic metaphor of where you are in this metaphor, if that's our reality. And I'm just going to be honest, I feel like I'm still on the Titanic. Like, I still go to the Titanic grocery store. I'm still walking around on the ship. I'm still delivering food to people. Like, I'm not on the self-sufficient yacht. Like, that's my happy place I'm trying to manifest. Yet, that's kind of the reason why I made this channel. And I ask that you hopefully help me manifest this future as well. And the story we're going to tell. And what you want. Because, I mean, if you want to find a giant zombie horde, I mean, go ahead. But that's not the main thing I want to do. You want some breathing room from that, so it's not like smack dab in your face all day, because then you don't really have a choice anymore, because you're just along for the ride. And like I was saying earlier with submarines and giving Japanese prisoners of war ice cream and making them cry because of how amazing it is, I want it to be in the future, like, I don't care what's going on. I'm saying I'm happy because it's Taco Tuesday. And, I care about the awesome food and things I have to go home to, no matter what crazy bullcrap's going on around me. And that home might suspiciously look like the Shire. That's my dream anyway. So, I wanted to say thanks for joining me on this weird one. I know it went kind of deep in some places. Yet, it's all about accepting and embracing our shadow and redeeming it even. And that we can fix it and we can heal it. Yet, you can't heal and fix a disease you can't face. That's kind of putting your head in the sand. And that I want to face this together with other people that can as well. And that I can find that vibration. And if some of those people are here right now, I want to say thank you. And that hopefully we can start building this awesome dream together. And that we can build our own version of this as well. It doesn't all have to be under my bubble, but I'm starting it because I am here where I am and I want to be a part of it. And that's the whole reason I'm starting this, is because it sounds awesome and amazing, and it kind of brings a tear to my eye, like I said, to imagine everything going wrong, but you can bring some order back into it and love and care and give someone some awesome food at the very least, starting there. Because you can do all kinds of other things, but the hierarchy of needs and happiness usually starts there. So, I want to say, like I said, once again, thank you for joining us. If you have any comments you want to add and things like that and synchronicities, I would very much appreciate them. And if you have any topics you would like to include in the presentation as well that you feel would fit into this and hopefully let other people know as well and bring all these opinions together, because the whole point of this was the two becoming one, but it's about the whole mind of God becoming one, about everything coming together in a singularity for a moment, and then it all, has a big bang and goes back out again, and then it comes all back together in this, in a cyclical cycle of duality. As we all write this crazy story through infinity and time together. So with that, we shall exit the infinity camera and have a great day or night wherever you are, and peace.